Okay, welcome everyone. This is our Empathy Circle dialogue between two organizations. That's Extinction Rebellion America and Young Evangelicals for Climate Change. And I thought we'd just start by introducing ourselves. I'm Edwin Rutsch from the XR Empathy Circle work group, as well as from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy. And Michelle, would you like to go?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Michelle, and I'm in Eugene, Oregon. I am here representing or doing work for Extinction Rebellion America in a few different capacities. So I will check to William.
Hi, yes, my name is William. I'm a field organizer located in Los Angeles for Young Evangelicals for Climate Action. We're for climate action, not climate change. Yes, and I'll check it to Dayna.
Yeah, you ruined my joke. I was going to pretend to be mad at you. I'm Dayna. I'm with Extinction Rebellion America. I'm working on the launch team. And what else? What other part of the prompt was there?
That's
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
I'm excited about using empathy circles, creating a culture of empathy, and empathy circles being such a great tool, a safe space for learning empathy.
Great, thanks. So yeah, so just the introduction into the empathy circle process. I think everyone had seen the process, or I just want to give a quick introduction. Anyone can see the how-to video at empathycircle.com, just so any viewers sort of understand what we're doing. In this process, one person is going to be the speaker, and they're going to select who they speak to. And you can share, a few ideas, and then you want to pause and let the listener reflect back what they hear you say. And you want to check, did the listener understand what you said? And if they didn't, say it again, maybe in different words, until you feel really heard and understood. It's really up to the speaker to feel like they've been understood to their satisfaction. And then if you feel like the listener heard you, you can say a bit more and then pause and then get that reflection. And we go for 5-minute turns, and when the time is up, I'll hold a little sign up, or if you don't have anything else to say, you've talked for a few minutes, you can just say, I feel fully heard, and that means it's then the listener's turn to become the speaker, and they select who they wish to speak to. And then that person reflects back in their own words, really what they're understanding the speaker is saying. And it continues, around for the time allotted, and we're going to go for up to 2 hours here. We'll see how much time we need. And then in terms of being the listener, you just reflect back in your own words what you understand the speaker is saying. And you don't want to add stuff. You don't want to ask questions. You're just trying to hear what the speaker is saying. And the only time you can sort of really interrupt is if the speaker is saying a lot and it's like, oh, you're thinking, I'm not going to be able to remember everything that they said. You can say, oh, please, can you pause? Let me just reflect back what I heard. So it's a fairly simple process, and kind of one of the best ways is just to learn by doing. So we can get started. Maybe if somebody wants to speak to me, I can just model the empathic listening, and we'll kind of move from there.
Well, I guess I can start. I'm
Okay.
not sure. I guess what is sort of coming to the surface for me is I was actually quite surprised when I got the buzz on my phone yesterday about the curfew here in Eugene. And so that is kind of what is percolating on my mind, is just it's it's a sad situation and an important thing that is happening right now. Something that the conversation that needed to happen for a long time is now coming up. It's the sadness for me is that it is taken so long, that we've tolerated this for so long. The understanding part of me understands the anger that is coming from it.
Well, let me just reflect back what I'm hearing so far. So I'm hearing some real sadness about what's happening out on the streets, and that it's some sadness that it's taken so long for this to happen, and maybe some surprise that even in Eugene you got an alert about the curfew there. So.
Yeah, and an understanding around the anger that is the force behind this. And I am hopeful that we can find a place of, I don't want to say calmness, but that we can embrace the grief behind all of this and unite going forward in a way that is understanding and loving, and bring some of the theory of change that we believe as Extinction Rebellion America that can bring change to our culture, to our society, to the system. We need systemic change.
Okay, so you really have understanding for the anger that you're seeing, and that you have hope that this can lead to some systemic change and maybe some dialogue and constructive way forward.
Yeah.
And it aligns with what Extinction Rebellion is about.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I guess, I don't want to suggest that Extinction Rebellion has all the answers, because we don't. We're just doing something that has not been done in a while, and in a way that we believe. What other choices do we have? What else is there on our plate? So we would like to show solidarity for the pain and the hurt and the grief that is around this, and we support change.
So you're saying that Extinction Rebellion you feel it doesn't have all the answers, but it's doing something that's needed to be done. And you mentioned again the grief that's there, and hoping that it's out of the grief that some change can happen.
Yeah, and I should just probably retract a little bit of what I'm saying, because I'm not speaking for everyone in Extinction Rebellion. I'm speaking on my personal behalf. So I just want to make sure that, that is apparent in this conversation.
Yeah, so you really want it to be clear that you're not speaking for all of Extinction Rebellion, but just for yourself.
Yeah. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
That was 5 minutes, Stu. Okay, I'll speak to William. Yeah, I was delighted to be invited to this discussion when I saw it was young evangelicals growing up as an evangelical in California, Sacramento. It was like, oh, great! I was looking forward to this, being part of this dialogue.
Yeah, no, definitely. It sounds like you're excited for it, especially since it's kind of that identity of part of who you were growing up, and just being able to harken back a little bit to that and have an understanding based off of something that you are familiar with.
Yeah, and and so it was, and I do hear, what Michelle is also, talking about, was like it's so in the streets right now, and I hope that I see that what we're doing here, the empathic dialogue, is a way forward, is to bring people together. So that's really my intention, is to, foster empathic dialogue. And I think it's really the solution, or it's a step forward. It's just it's a constructive way forward.
Yeah. So it sounds like with everything that's going on currently, that these empathy circles and these types of conversations are a step towards healing, and may not be the solution itself, but it's along the way.
Yeah, and personally, growing up evangelical, I spent many years traveling, and I became more, I guess, progressive. I grew up very conservative, became more progressive, and it created, there was sort of, a generation gap in my own family. And we started actually doing empathy circles, 6-7 years ago. And so the whole family gets together and we use the empathy circle process for talking about family issues. So I think for at least in my family, it was something that healed that, 60s, 70s generation gap.
Yeah, it sounds like the traveling opened up your worldview from it being so conservative and just the only thing you were taught growing up, versus having these outside inputs, and it caused a little bit of a rift, but you're able to remedy that with these empathy circle conversations in your family.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thanks.
All right, I will speak to Dayna then. Yeah, I definitely want to go off of what Michelle was saying a little bit, just about with everything that's going on. I feel definitely a heaviness. Seeing just the amount of pain that people are going through right now. That this is not just a single isolated event, but this is many, 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 many years of being oppressed, and of systemically being treated wrong, and just that anger and that rage is kind of flowing over into I guess more of the public view for everyone to see. And it is it's heavy to see that it's how many people have been affected by it, and hearing all the stories from people or of people they knew who have been affected in the past by being racially profiled, or being a victim of police brutality, or of these different racially motivated things. And my heart is definitely heavy.
So I want to reflect back that be really resonating with what Michelle was sharing about, that you feel a weight in your experience, in your heart, being confronted by the immensity of this situation, and all of the intricacy of how much hurt is involved, how many unique experiences of suffering are all in this time that are erupting right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, being Christian and viewing it from a spiritual lens as well, just that it seems like the Spirit is moving through the entire nation and the people all at once. There is this stirring of people's hearts right now, and it is encouraging to see that there are people who maybe normally don't feel like they know enough to speak out on these kinds of things, or haven't experienced it themselves, but just seeing that it is right versus wrong. It's very clear cut. It's not a controversial opinion. It's, we need to take a stand on these things. And so while there is a lot of heaviness, I do feel that hope as well.
Mhm. What is the word? It's a very Christian kind of word, like the spirit. The spirit is coming through people. I don't have the good word. It's like uplifting and light, the light. That at the same time that all of that hurt and suffering is making itself heard. You're also seeing, maybe for the first time or in a way that has never had a chance to express so much, that a lot of people are willing to use their voice to acknowledge right and wrong, where maybe they were looking away before, or not able to see it. And so the way that occurs to you is as an expression of God's will through the heart of people everywhere.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think the last thing kind of that this entire situation has been making me realize is too that usually we like to push past the pain that is happening, but in the Bible, the practice of like lament and mourning is a huge topic, and being able to sit in that grief and recognize what is going on is painful is an important part of the process, and acknowledging those feelings and coming to terms with them, and just realizing that lament isn't wasted time or energy, that it is like fertile soil for what comes next. You're in a place where you have kind of begun to process through what is happening, and then you're in a healthy space to move forward in speaking out and acting out to what's happening.
I'm hearing you speak about some wise words. No, that's too analytical. About that come from your tradition, about the importance of lament and mourning in the process of self-transformation, or maybe the revelation of the Holy Spirit, that people are drawn, have the opportunity to go inside and feel this, be with their sadness and allow it to transform them, so that they can better do God's will, or how would you say it, so that they have more clarity. I'm trying to not import my own ways of understanding it, which are very similar.
No, yeah, that sounds right. I'd say maybe perhaps discern what needs to happen.
So that as people get more clear about, as they feel their grief, that they can come to more place of clarity and discernment about what they're being called to do in response.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Dayna. I feel fully heard.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll talk to Michelle.
I will listen.
I feel funny. I feel self-conscious and pink. Look how pink I look. Right now the sunlight is shining right off of the roof of a house in the building next to me, shining really right into my eyes. And I could rearrange, but it feels like allowing what is to be. It's really brilliant and beautiful, if I just let myself be embarrassed to be pink.
So it's, I'm hearing you say that pink is not your color. I'm finding compelled to want to say something about that, but I don't know that I can, but I just want to say it's beautiful. But you are struggling with, I guess, just maybe struggle is not, it's too big a word, but embarrassment of being pink amongst our maybe less colorful screens, and think that the lighting could be changed and altered with the drapes or the curtains through the window.
Yeah. Or I would sit in a different position so I could look better. But I'm not doing it. No, but it reminds me of something that someone was sharing somewhere recently in an empathy circle, and something that I've also experienced recently in some contexts, where, the race conversation is up a lot. After I was in a conversation with some people who were, some of them quite angry with white people, and I actually introjected some of that anger in the conversation, so that afterwards I felt my skin was too white. I started to feel ugly. How's that, Michelle?
That's good. So you were in a conversation with some people, some angry, upset people, and if I heard you right, they were white.
They were not. They were mixed.
They were mixed.
It was just a group.
Okay, but the conversation made you feel ugly in your whiteness, ugly in.
Yeah, I wouldn't be that direct. That would be a violent way to speak. They didn't make me feel anything, but I noticed after encountering their hatred that some of it magically jumped into my own experience.
So you felt, from what they were saying and the way that it was coming, it made you feel just awful in, or uncomfortable in having.
Ugly. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that it made me feel, but I'm watching that dynamic that I haven't been on the receiving end of very much in my life. And that is someone looking at me and thinking that I'm ugly or something other than I should be, and that my skin color has to do with it.
Okay. So it sounds like you were living what other people have been living for so long, in a discomfort of your skin based on your skin color. That kind of came out in the conversation.
And for me, it was really actually a pretty novel experience also, because I have a really high self-esteem. I've had a very beautiful life, been super lucky all the time, so a lot of privilege there. People could be understood in terms of privilege or good fortune. And maybe you can reflect that back while I catch the other piece.
Sure. You were saying that you had a nice upbringing, a comfortable upbringing, an upbringing that gave you some privilege. So the experience of having that uncomfortness and ugliness in your skin was rather new and unexpected.
Yeah, I even grew up basically a racial minority where I lived, but I was not, only on very rare occasion did I ever receive that kind of hostility, racial hostility.
So it wasn't something you had really experienced much, this racial hostility against you, even though you have grown up as a minority in your community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, I guess that's me. Yeah,
Who are you speaking to?
oh yes, I am speaking to William. Will you listen?
Absolutely.
I've experienced something similar to Dayna. I didn't grow up as a minority. I did grow up well, I think I'm going to avert that because I think it detracts from the depth of what's happening. But I admittedly had not really been paying too much attention until very recently with what was going on. I I had heard about the murders, but I just thought this was going to be another same old same. And, you know, I'm focused on the importance of changing the system, because these bottlenecks like Black Lives Matter and this issue has been going on for so long, and nothing but breadcrumbs has been received with it. And so I really wanted, social justice issues are so important to me, and I tried to get involved in them, and there were so many organizations doing so much great, amazing work behind it, but there was so much wrong with our system, and I didn't know where to plug myself in. And when I learned about the theory of change and how powerful that is, that to me was the magic. Maybe magic is too strong a word, but the stars were coming down and saying, this is where I needed to go.
Yeah, it sounds like originally with everything that's happening, there was almost a numbness because this happens so often, and kind of not even knowing if this will be the event or the thing that kind of blows up and pushes things forward. And it sounds like being involved with social justice work in the past, it was almost so overwhelming, the amount that was wrong systemically. And that was, it's difficult to even see how change could be possible. And the wins felt very small. Meanwhile, the system was still the same until you learned about the theory of change, is what sounds like that was kind of that turning point.
Yeah, exactly. And it was something I felt that, yes, this is it. This is what's going to make our world a better place. And it's not just for climate change and the ecological breakdown that we're facing. Citizens' assemblies is a form of deliberative democracy with which the citizens can be selected through a process of sortition, similar to a jury. And because our governments are failing us. They have been failing us for decades, if not centuries. And they have been dividing us with various tactics and various weapons of social manipulation. And so in order to beat this, we need to, maybe we need to is a little bit, not quite the right words, but if by uniting behind as a people to stand up to this suppression through the theory of change, we can make change happen. And a citizens' assembly is bringing that power back to the people.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of legitimate frustration with the government and the systems and how things are being run and how those are problematic. And through those same systems, there isn't going to be the change that we need. But it sounds like you find hope in these citizen assemblies, that these are a different way forward, where the power and the voice is in a different place, where things can actually progress and can actually change.
Yes, yes. And so what the Citizens Assembly is essentially like a jury. It's our third demand, and it's selection through sortition. And so there's equal representation of all people who then get information from scientists, from specialists, from experts in the industry, from frontline communities, all aspects of our culture, to say this is what's happening, this is how it's affecting us, and this is what we can do, and these are the consequences of those decisions that we make. And whereby then the citizens make the decisions and let our policymakers know this is how we want the change to happen. These are the policies to remove, and these are the ones to put in place of.
Yeah, it sounds like you find hope in the diverseness of the citizen assemblies, that these are people coming from all walks of life, and that it is a better representation of what needs doing and how the people feel, and we can take that forward.
Thank you. I feel fully heard.
All right, I will speak to Edwin.
Listening.
I think I had a little more thoughts continuing off of what I was speaking on earlier. Just that I feel frustrated seeing people who are criticizing how people are choosing to react to things. And that a lot of people I'm seeing who perhaps don't understand the intensity of the oppression and how long it's been happening, are seemingly trying to downplay the anger and what is happening, and caring more about material things versus the people's lives who have been taken away.
I'm hearing that you feel frustration because there's people who are criticizing people's anger and how they're kind of expressing themselves, and they're not seeing how people's experience what's happened to them, and so they're not recognizing that, and you're feeling some frustration about them not recognizing that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that part bothers me a lot, the reduction of human life over the importance of material things. Because for Christians, like human beings are made in God's image, and it's a reflection of something good. And so life is important, and we try to distance ourselves from material things that are temporary, whether it be material things, material wealth, those sorts of things. It is in our theology to be separate from those things that are so-called worldly. And it has been frustrating seeing a lot of these same people care more for the worldly things than for the lives. And part of that makes me think of the climate movement and what's happening with that as well.
So your frustration is with people who are valuing material things over sort of the humanity and the spiritual aspect of humanity, and you're seeing a parallel with the climate change issue as well, valuing material over sort of the well-being or the humanity of people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And what reminds me of that is just this insistence that we can't change things that quickly because it will hurt us in X, Y, and Z way, whether it be economically, like, these different things aren't possible because it will put too much strain on industry, it will put too much on this. But the cost of of doing that too slowly is human life, is these people suffering, these people who contribute the least to these problems are forced to feel the effects of our corporations, of our government, who are valuing putting these profits over the well-being of people because they may not understand how it directly affects, or they simply don't care.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's that frustration where people are valuing material parts of life and just want slow incremental change, and they're not seeing how what's happening in society, how it's really impacting people, how it's impacting their lives. And so some real frustration about sort of that mindset and that way of thinking.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And it is, I think, especially frustrating when we have all of the science, when we have all of the research, we have all of these things that are very clearly, again, one-sided and saying a specific thing. And that has been turned into almost a political opinion or a belief. And the consequences are the same. It is this precious human life that is at stake and at risk. And not just us, but every species, all of life. And it is for me, seeing everything that is happening in the way that I see the Spirit moving through the country, through what's going on with what's happening now, like there will be a similar thing to happen when it comes to realizing what's being done to our earth, that people's hearts will be moved as well to value that human life and to demand change.
There's just a truck outside. I hope you're not hearing the sound. So it's again that frustration that people are valuing material over the well-being, and with the present situation, you're seeing that as parallel to the climate issue too. That there's all this science and that's just being ignored and it's actually just being turned into a political opinion. It's not dealing with the science anymore.
Yeah.
So
yes.
That was the time too.
Fully heard.
Moved it to 6 minutes. We're at 6 minutes per person now. Thanks. Speak to Dayna. I might. So what keeps coming up for me in these conversations is sort of the way forward, and for me, it's always been about dialogue. So in the present, political, the demonstrations that I keep seeing people saying, oh, something's got to happen. Nothing's been happening. And it's like, there's almost like this vacuum of like, what's the next step? What do we do? So.
Yeah. It feels like you're poised right at the starting line of the like, I know what to do, and they're like, there's nothing to do. What are we gonna do?
That really captures it, because it's like I'm saying, well, how about we start having some dialogues, get the police and the officers with, with the Black Lives Matter or demonstrators, have empathy circles, it's, and I feel like this frustration, it's like, it's like my voice feels so small in terms of kind of getting out there, in terms of even just bringing this into the conversation. So I feel some kind of frustration, like, how to get it out there, more.
Yeah. I'm hearing you describe the experience of being certain that you have something to offer right now, and being kind of shocked or like overwhelmed or
Frustrated, maybe.
intimidated by the sheer quantity of disinterest or underinterest.
Yeah, I didn't use that word uninterest, but that really captures it, because it's like say, hey, try this. And it's kind of like, oh, we need an answer. We need an answer. It's like, hey, how about trying this? And it's like, yeah. We need an answer. We need an answer.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just kind of weird. It's just kind of. So it's just the dynamic that I see out there.
Yeah, it sounds like there's even some mystery mixed in with, how can it be that this could be such a good fit for how to deal with the situation, and yet people are like assuming that it's not what they're looking for.
Yeah, and it's like that's sort of, I'm sort of generalizing there, and it's part of it is how to, like with XR. I've been working, 8 months, a year. It's sort of bringing the empathic, listening process into XR, and it's really starting to catch on. There's, you're now taking part in an empathy circle. Many of the co-founders of XR have taken part in empathy circles, where we've got the XR Principles Empathy Circle series going, and there's probably about over 20 chapters who are co-hosting. So it is spreading. So I'm like excited about that. I see hope. It's within this racial issue that, I feel kind of sadness, and some real sadness.
I hear clarifying. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just feel sadness that it's like, I don't I don't see the, it kind of moving there yet. So.
Yeah, and it's really, something is really needed there. It's such a fertile ground that you're wanting to be able to bring it there now. And so your frustration about, feeling small compared to the apathy, it doesn't pertain to all communities and all contexts, but you're really feeling it right now, because you would like to be able to bring it to the front lines of the racial.
Yeah, and I think it's that sadness I wanted to express. There's a certain kind of feeling of sadness I just noticed that came up about it.
Yeah, you're feeling sad that you would like to be able to share this healing where there's so much hurt.
Yeah, so I've thought, well, I could take our empathy tent. We've got 2 empathy tents that we set up in public, and we offer empathic listening, and could take it to downtown Berkeley and, take some kind of action there. I'm kind of concerned though about all the COVID issues. I'm almost 65, and, you're getting at that age where kind of more of a higher risk group. So I do have concerns about that.
Yeah, it sounds like your heart would like to be there, really would like to be there, with the empathy tent and creating the space for that kind of healing to happen, even for anyone. But the risk to your own health is too high. But it sounds like it's a sad thing that you can't just up and go.
Yeah.
Dive in.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
William?
Yes.
Okay. I've had this similar experience yesterday as what Edwin just shared about my whole town, not my whole town, an entire sector of the community where I live in a small town in Wisconsin was out on the street yesterday afternoon, with signs. And there were even some counter protesters, which is my favorite. The edge, I really like the edge in action environments where people feel like, similar to what Edwin was also sharing about, where people are coming in with the assumption of being opposed to each other because there's this opportunity for nonviolence and love to transform those assumptions. So I really wanted to be there, but they were not practicing social distancing. And I had a personal care client who's really immunocompromised, and I was just about to go visit her, and there's just no way I could join them.
Yeah, it sounds like a mix of that empathy and your heart wanting to be out there and really caring for what is going on. And even more so, you see the challenge of others counter-protesting as an opportunity instead of something that is like a blockade that others might see as a bad thing. You view this as a good thing. This is a people you can reach in that way. And despite wanting to be there, your heart is even fuller for this immunocompromised person you're helping to take care of, and that you really do value that human life, and you want to protect that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess in reflecting there, there's a part of me that wants to be in the throng, is that a word? Of people living and loving together, that sense of togetherness and possibility that happens in action spaces. It really feeds my soul, but I think there must be some ego in there, some smaller self. In my case, in this situation, that would have had to, I would have had to obey a smaller self in order to participate in this case, because of what it would have cost for my person.
Yeah, it sounds like there was even a little bit of struggle in deciding what to do, because it is a mix of your heart and wanting to be out there and being in these movement spaces of what's happening, but also a little small bit of that ego and attention for going out into these places as well. So it sounds like you were wrestling with the realization that is sometimes a part of the reason as well.
Mm-hmm. Like I live in a small town. I feel vulnerable talking about this, but that's what happens, I guess, when I open my mouth. So I'm autistic, and I often don't emote in ways that people find relatable. And then I end up sometimes being sort of framed as the bad guy, often being framed as a bad guy. And that happens that oftentimes when people are being framed as a bad guy, they are some kind of neurodiverse, actually, I've come to find. But there are some people in my town who have, in one moment or another, insinuated that I don't get race issues. And so it would have been dangerous to attend, and it's dangerous to not attend in that situation.
Yeah, it sounds like you're feeling very vulnerable, sharing this, and that people will often misjudge you and expect you to act in certain ways, and that they have these assumptions of how people respond to things, and that isn't how everyone responds to things. And based on those preconceptions and assumptions, they tend to judge you, and that is difficult, and that is something that is painful, not feeling that understanding and not feeling that empathy for others, despite you empathizing with others so often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a piece about that people, if as an autistic, when I'm, when someone has selected me to persecute socially in all the subtle ways that humans do this to people, they will get you coming or going, whether you do or don't do something. So the fact that race is being discussed by everyone makes me more of a target, because they could say I did the right thing if I did the wrong thing if I go, or the wrong thing if I don't go. That's maybe the more egoic piece.
Yeah, it sounds like you feel like there is almost no winning despite the decision you make. You can see the good in going and not going and how that makes sense, but there is that judgment despite it, and it feels frustrating that comes across that way.
Yeah, that it's a potential, when the energies are rising and they want somebody to fight against, and I heard a rumor that person, and let's go get her, that it feels dangerous to even, it feels dangerous to be autistic, is really what I'm trying to say. Because I should be able to say, what? Me? This is actually hurtful to me. I care so much, which is how that most people communicate, but I don't communicate in that way. Thank you. I'm out of time.
Yeah, just to reflect, it sounds like, that again, the way you respond to things is different than most people do, and it seems like most people aren't willing to take that time to learn how you specifically respond to things, and to make you feel seen and validated in your responses.
Sure. I'm sorry, I'm out of time, but I'm not really even seeking validation. It's just a matter of danger. When the mob justice mentality is getting going, we want somebody to be the bad guy. That's when I'm at risk.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
And
it sounds like.
Yeah. So there's many layers, but.
Right. It sounds, like that frustration and that fear of just being pointed to and being the one that they are taking that out on.
Yeah, I'll probably be dead next year. You guys can look back on the recording. Okay, your turn.
I'll speak to Michelle.
I will listen.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Dayna, for sharing. Yeah, these empathy circles are interesting. It's nice being an active listener, because it forces me to pay attention and not think about what I want to say next, because I'm reflecting. So that's nice, but it also means I have to take some time and form some thoughts now. I think what I am thinking about, and I think I'm having this theme of relating a little bit to the last thing I've said, is sort of going back to that idea of material things versus human life, but looking at it from a different perspective, and that in most Christian tradition, we split these two things by, either there's like spiritual, and then there's like physical, and we tend to have this dualism that these spiritual things are of the utmost importance, and that physical things aren't, like, these don't matter as much. These are earthly, and it's a little different than like saying material things don't matter, where like this is like earthly, like human life or the rest of creation and earth, that basically matters to God. In our tradition, he's created things, and so that there is an essence of spiritual in the physical world, and we get in trouble when we tend to try and split the two apart, and that leads to not valuing the earth as we should.
So you appreciate the empathy circle format in that it really forces you to listen to the other person instead of, what am I going to say next? Which gave you pause to kind of come up with what was going on in your heart and your mind. And what I'm hearing come out of that is the sort of perspective of material versus spiritual, and the Christian perspective of that it is through the division of the two and the weighting of one heavily or the other heavily is the disconnect, whereas there's sort of a balance of the two, not in perhaps the sense of the consumerism, commercialism, physical, but the natural physical that we rely on.
Yes, yeah. That's a good way to put it, because I was kind of rambling, so that was a very good summary. Thank you. Yeah, and I think that a lot of times the modern church, when we talk about faith, we focus so much on just the spiritual, just our relationship with God and what happens to us in that, versus more of instead of that vertical faith, a horizontal faith, like how are we living out our faith to helping others and to helping the earth. And often, since things get overly focused on the spiritual, there tends not to be a focus on creation and the things of this world, which do matter. And I think that society as a whole, like the dominant power and culture, likes it when the church is overly focused on the spiritual, because then the church is not affecting change in the world. If we're just worried about me, and God, and not actually doing the works part of faith and not living out the rest of the part and how we are affecting the physical world around us and the natural world around us, that not much change happens if we don't think about those things.
I'm hearing that the focus of the spiritual side, which is important, is giving power to those that, and maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but giving power to those that seek the power paradigm by not allowing the other half to be spoken. That the faith side is doing a disservice by focusing tunnel vision on that aspect of it, when there's such a large other piece that, if brought together, would break the foundations of that which is kind of causing the troubles in our world.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think the part of it is that there's plenty of scripture around works, and that faith without works is dead. And how can you say you have faith if you're not acting out of love and in that faith? And so I think with everything that's going on currently, whether it's this conversation around race or climate, like these are active ways that Christians and the church can be involved in living out their faith, and that they just need someone to come to them in a way that they understand and explain it that way. And I hope that that's the work I'm doing, is helping them to do that.
So you're seeking to bring that physical aspect into the faith, that aspect of remembering that it's not just about the spiritual and love for God and for maybe even each other, but to look more towards stewardship as well, and to helping those that are down instead of being, and really bringing that aspect into the faith side of your life, of the religious faith side of things. And I'm sorry for stumbling. I'm not a faith-driven person, so I'm a little bit not sure about the wording to use. So I apologize, but I do mean the deepest respect.
No, yeah, thank you. You're doing great, Michelle. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Oh, it's my turn. I will speak to, who have I not spoken? Dayna. Dayna. I really appreciate the conversations that I've been hearing. And I'm honestly not sure where to go from here. It comes from listening, I guess. I really want the greatest of success in your endeavors, William. I think you are on to something that has been lacking and is so important. And I really hope that BLM keeps pushing for what they're pushing for, and all the other organizations to do the hard work that they've been doing. I feel like we are in a time where there is opportunity, as scary as it looks. People are starting to really see what's going on. And I'm just going to stop there and wait for reflection, I guess.
She had selected me, but she spoke to William. Should William reflect?
You reflect what you hear.
I heard a reflection of support and sympathy or empathy, co-feeling experience with what William has shared, and with his the feelings about the importance of this time and the good fight of these organizations that are heading up this transformative moment for our culture.
Yeah, and I feel so a little self-centered in really wanting to promote the piece about nonviolence and the piece about the theory of change, because I feel like I understand the violence and I understand the anger, but my fear is that the establishment's tool that they specialize in is violence. That's their specialty. And so we need to come up with, I guess, I believe that based on the readings of the work of like Chenoweth and Gene Sharp, the Engler brothers, that nonviolent civil disobedience, direct action, I'm not saying we do nothing. I'm saying it's not about marches, it's not about petitions, it's not about rallies, it's not about sending letters to senators, it's not just about voting, it's a broken system, and we've done everything within the system that we can do, and it has failed us, and it is now time to cause disruption on a massive scale, but in a non-violent way that disrupts business as usual, that disrupts the economy, in order to be heard.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be able to reflect back all of those small pieces, but the gist of what I'm hearing is that you feel very inspired right now. And maybe I heard you say also a little bit self-conscious to be asserting your enthusiasm in this context, but that you feel so inspired about the Extinction Rebellion's theory of change, which involves civil disobedience on a massive scale in order to disrupt business as usual and the destruction and violence that it perpetrates and ensures for our future. That now that that there's this sense of urgency in this moment, in this time, in this now, to show up with a nonviolent theory of change.
Yes. It is it's our governments that are failing us, and it is the pillar of power that we must dismantle and bring that power back to the power of people, where the will of us is being heard and the will of us is being acted on.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry. There's just someone entered my office and it's taking space. I didn't quite get the gist of what you said.
No problem. Essentially just that the will of the people needs to be heard. The will of the people needs to be acted upon. That's essentially.
Yeah, it seems that now is the time for the people to be heard and for us to stop pretending that the only voice that's in charge, or the only voice that gets to be heard is not the people's voice.
Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Edwin?
Yep, listening.
The other piece that was coming up for me, but that I didn't, my time ran out. The other piece of privilege that I experience is that I think this might be too subtle to share. I'm going to just reflect for a second. I really don't understand racism. I really don't understand it, and I never have understood it or experienced it. And that has to do with autism as much as anything else, probably more than anything else. But it's a different way of processing that doesn't block things into categories, which is the mechanism of race. But so I have it's a kind of inner privilege of not having to carry the shame that most people experience around the race conversation, but also not being able to value signal the shame that most people are able to value signal around the race conversation.
So I'm hearing that you don't really understand race, or because you think it's because of your autism, and because with autism you can't sort of create these type of categories, and because you don't have that sense of shame that comes from the race issue.
Racism, specifically value judging around any kind of broad category.
Oh, so there's a sort of a value judging about categories, and you don't have that value judging. And because of that, most people would have, some people would have a sense of shame about the racism.
That they have in their own experience, that they recognize in their own experience, according to what people share about racism.
So people share their experience of racism from their own experience about it, and maybe feel a sense of shame from that, and they share that, and that since you don't have that, they signal that, and then since you don't have that, you can't signal that, and it sounds like it has an impact on how people see you. Or
yeah, so for normal people, for social part of the hierarchy, the social hierarchies that are always kind of in flux, is that people use shame in order to secure their place in the pecking order. It's like, I know I'm bad, please don't kick me out all the way, and if you do that kind of value signaling, they won't kill you.
Mm-hmm. So you see that that shame is there's sort of a hierarchy of shame. You kind of put yourself into that hierarchy of shame. Say, please, I feel this shame. Because I have shame, you'll kind of accept me, or okay.
Yes, yes, some of that. Shame is just one of the mechanisms in the social pecking order that I can see from the outside, because I don't experience, because it's not my nature. So shame is only one of the mechanisms that people use to secure their place in the social landscape. Because
you're sort of standing outside of this, you're able to see this, and you're just saying that I'm hearing shame is just one of the attributes that people place themselves into the social structure. Yeah, and that people consider to be a normal human experience and expect to see in another human. So there's sort of a social expectation to see people expressing their shame. Mm-hmm. And if you don't express shame around the race issue, then it's a given that you're racist. And so if you're like not showing shame around this, then you're just assumed to be racist. You're judged as being racist. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they'll kill you. It's a dangerous place to be. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're really bringing it up again about you'll be killed. People will actually kill you for not sort of showing that. Yeah, it's the same. It's another iteration of the same danger that that Black and Brown people experience. It's the pecking order and this value judging, about groups.
So, but if people think that there's a righteousness in that better than, worse than categorizing, they get even more power by climbing on other groups and stamping them out.
So there's sort of a pecking order or a hierarchy, and you're sort of describing how that works, that you can use some of these mechanisms to raise yourself in the hierarchy or in the pecking order.
Yes, that's what most people are doing most of the time, is negotiating the way that they're seen by others. But I don't do that. I don't know how to do that. I don't have, like I was trying to say, it's a certain kind of privilege, and it's obviously also a curse.
So you have a privilege and a curse that you don't, because of your neural makeup, that you don't do that. And it has a privilege as well as a curse. You pay a price for it too. You feel
Thanks.
heard? Okay. Speak to William. Thanks.
Yes, I'm listening.
Yeah, in terms of the racism issue, I really appreciate what Dayna is saying, because I see there's deeper issues behind the racism that I wanted to kind of go into.
Yeah, it sounds like some of what Dayna said was really resonating with you, and you agree, and you're looking to dig into that even more.
Yeah, and for me, underlying racism is judgment, that we're judging people. And so I see that as a core. I mean, it's a deeper underlying essence to racism. And there's all kinds of ways people judge each other. You know, I think Dayna is feeling like she's being judged for maybe being autistic or not. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different, judgments there. There's class judgments. There's male-female judgments. There's, if you're a white male, judgment. It's like, we're kind of awash in this culture of judgment. And for me, racism is just another form of judgment. And within any ethnic group, there's tons of judgment throughout any ethnic group. So yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you see that judgment abounds in society, in different groups, in many different ways, and that racism is a form of that. And all of these things are symptoms of something deeper.
And so, yeah, and there's a dynamic for me. There's empathy and judgment. So judgment blocks empathic connection. So that's the aspect that I look at. Whatever form of judgment it is, it blocks empathic connection. And in a sense, empathy is I see it is the sort of the antidote to judgment. Is that instead of saying, I judge you, it's like, I hear where you are. So I see those as two different modes of of being.
Yeah, it sounds like for you that this issue of judgment that is so prevalent can be countered by empathy, and that judgment is severing those ties of connection between people by which they can relate to each other and understand each other.
And there's even judgment of judgments. So you can create internal loops. I'm going to judge you for judging. So the first step is just to do what we're doing here. I see this as sort of like a little baby, really an important first step is, before I judge you, I might be judging you in the back of my mind or something, but I'm going to listen to you to your satisfaction. I'm going to empathize with you until you feel heard. And then I might throw my judgments out when it's my turn to speak, but you'll listen to my judgments, and that transforms the judgment as well. So I see empathy circle as sort of a judgment transformation machine process. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought of that. So.
Yeah, it sounds like you understand that these judgment can get caught in this negative feedback loop of continually judging, of judging the judgment of others. And that in these empathy circles, even kind of recognizing that we may have our own preconceived judgment of others and what they're saying, but because we are able to hear each other out and listen, that our thoughts and that judgment is being transformed depending on what's being said and how we are listening to each other.
And I think this, since we're all activists here, that this, what we're doing here, I think is sort of a missing component from activism, is my understanding of Kingian nonviolence is you see a social problem, which means somebody's not being heard. And then you go to the powers that be and say, hey, let's have a dialogue about how to solve this. And often the response is, no, we don't need to talk to you because we've got the power and we don't have to talk. So you do these, you do all this action to get the powers that be to the table to have a dialogue. And, with him, it's like, from what I'm understanding of the Kingian nonviolence, that's where it ends, is you bring people to the table to have a dialogue, like, how are we going to solve this problem?
Yeah, it sounds like you do have this understanding of why dialogue is so important and why these empathy circles and building that human connection is so important. And it can be frustrating or nonsensical seeing a lot of organizations, a lot of activists, a lot of movements not have that dialogue portion that is missing. And since it's such an essential part, that not much progress will be made if we're not able to empathize and have that connection with each other and learn and transform.
And what I see is that dialogue is, what is the structure of the dialogue? And I would like to see the dialogue structured as an empathy circle. So it's like we request an empathy circle from the president, the governor, the Congress, the corporations. We want an empathy circle. They say, no, we're not going to talk to you. You do the action, and then it ends in an empathy circle. So what we're doing here, I see, is a very critical possible, step forward.
Yeah, it sounds like to you that the empathy circle is the best way to go about those dialogues, and that this format is an ideal way of heard and of being heard.
I feel fully heard. Yep, thanks.
All right, I will speak to Dayna. I spoke to Michelle last time, I think. I think for me, what was sticking in my mind listening to Edwin was the judgment portion of it. And that I feel like there is not a stereotype, but there's like a feeling that Christians are judgmental and have this holier than thou attitude and place themselves above others. And that can cause these rifts, or that can cause these negative feelings before even talking with them or understanding.
Can I just reflect back? I think what I'm hearing you say is that you're aware of a widespread, or an occasional at least, belief or assumption that Christians are coming from a place that is righteous and better than others.
Yeah. And I don't think that assumption is necessarily wrong by people who hold it either, especially seeing how, when looking at perhaps our country, when we see how our elected leaders who call themselves Christian act, and the way they go about things, and how their words and actions are not loving and not caring, and they are very judgmental and superior. And I think that has, yeah.
just hear a recognition that it makes sense that that many people would have that association, because there are the most prominent Christians in the country don't espouse Christian Christian behavior or faith.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
in their action.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. They take the label to appeal to voters or to a certain party and things like that, but their actions and policies don't reflect that actual belief. And I'm thinking back to the judgment portion, where a lot of times these people who do call themselves Christians are the most judgmental to others and are somehow trying to push their own views onto people who don't necessarily believe the same things.
Yeah, I think I hear you say that that maybe that you feel sadness, that sometimes Christians can be violent in their assumption or presumption that other people should hold the same beliefs that they hold.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's striking to me because those are not Christian values at all. Like in our faith, there are verses in the scripture talking about not judging others. And there's one that talks about, before you take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the plank out of your own eye. And like looking within ourselves and reflecting what are our biases, or what are the things we're doing wrong that we could be doing better, and not projecting that almost onto others. And in the act of trying to hide our own faults, we're trying to point out the faults of others. And so yeah, that sense of judgment from Christians is not part of our faith, and yet has somehow become lodged into it.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like there's a feeling of maybe disappointment or feeling of being perplexed or distressed that that a big piece of the teachings of Christianity seem to have missed the mark in the spirit or of a lot of fellow Christians or people who consider themselves to be Christian, that they can be quite judgmental of others and not recognize that it is compromises the integrity. I think I'm hearing you valuing humility as a Christian value.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, that recognition of what we could be doing better and not judging others, and kind of thinking back to Edwin, also the opposite of that judgment is this empathy and these human connections, and how in Christian faith tradition, we're not called to judge, but we are told to love everyone without exception. There is no list of who to love and who not to love. It is supposed to be everyone. When somebody is asking Jesus, like, what are the greatest, like, if you had to sum everything up, like what are we supposed to do? And he says, to love God and love your neighbor, and neighbor is everyone. And it's not specific groups of people, and you don't get to leave out groups you don't like, and you don't get to leave out groups that don't agree with you, and you don't get to judge them, because that's not what you're called to do. We're called to love our neighbor, which is everyone. And so seeing when that doesn't happen tends to be frustrating and saddening, because I think, again, because of the people who call themselves Christian, who are our leaders, we don't see them reflecting this behavior. And so oftentimes maybe the normal Christian thinks that that behavior is okay when it's not, and that's not part of what we're supposed to be doing.
What I'm taking from what you're saying is the sense of widespread misunderstanding about what it is to be Christian with regard to judging others or approaching others with curiosity that allows love to be there.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Dayna.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It was good. I feel fully heard.
Okay. How are we doing on time?
We got 25 minutes to 2
Okay.
hours.
Mhm. Yeah. So curiosity is
Who are you
the.
speaking to?
Oh, Michelle.
I will listen.
Okay. Curiosity is the thing that's missing in all of these situations, and I think that it's the thing also that empathy awakens in people, the experience of empathizing, because you don't even know that you think that you know what's in the other until you begin to encounter that there's something else there, which piques the interest in discovering more. That's how I experience the acting of love, what the Christian teaching that William was talking about, that we are told to love everyone. The how to love, I think, it feels like curiosity for me.
I'm hearing from you, Dayna, that the action of love and or maybe empathy is through the curiosity to understand the perspective of another, or the curiosity is just a great way of describing. I guess we've essentially opening the door to want to know more.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I would love to have some real-time conversation with William. I really appreciate a passionate Christian experience, and I've had a lot of. I grew up in Texas with a lot of very Christians, if you ask them. But I became an atheist when I learned about Santa Claus. And suddenly the world made so much sense. Oh, no Santa Claus, no Easter Bunny, no Jesus. And I saw hypocrisy all around me by people calling themselves Christian. And it wasn't until I became, that's enough. You go ahead and reflect that back.
Thanks, Nina. I heard you reflect that you have an interest in engaging with William a little bit further, that you were born, I'm not sure, and raised in Texas, and in that was a certain amount of Christianity that you were born into, and that when you realized that Santa Claus was not a real thing, that sort of brought open the curiosity of, or recognition that, well, if that's not real, what else isn't real, and exploring that and having some recognition.
Yeah, it was kind of different than that, but kind of like that. It suddenly all clicked into place. It's like, oh, no, now I understand. There's not a guy that flies around. There's not a bunny that brings candy. You know, all that stuff was, I thought I had figured out that that it was all a hoax at age 5?
So at a really young age, it wasn't like an exploration thing. It was more like a aha moment that the world was not tooth fairies and Easter bunnies, and
Mm-hmm.
religion was a part of that. Religion became a part of that because you saw the ingenuity. Not
That came later. That's the part that came later, you know, when I realized, oh, I'm still supposed to be Christian. Um, and this is what it is to be Christian. Like, people going to church just to eat donuts and compare their name brand jeans. So, but I remember moving on like down the timeline in middle school, like I really wanted to be taken by the Holy Spirit. You know, I felt that evangelism is a part of my soul. And I also understand the Christian values. I experience the Christian values. So if there's a way that we can teach them, then I want to be doing it. I just never encountered any faith communities that were really living it.
it wasn't right away that you felt, it was a little bit later in life that the conflict of the good of religion with the materialist side of things that was still continuing to perpetuate, led you to, in your heart, you felt that it was about the good, and it was about doing right, and it was about connecting the spirit and the natural world to that was the pathway you saw was the right pathway.
It looked like a fun one, at least, but there wasn't any faith community that offered that option. It was just a social landscape to be navigated.
Okay, so you felt, or I hear you express a desire for that which it held, but you weren't experiencing that in the real world of it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Edwin, would you listen to me?
Listening.
Some of what Dayna was saying resonated with me a lot, in the aspect of, it feels like judgment is kind of the core of our conversation. And what Dayna was saying about growing up without really feeling, and maybe this isn't how I'm understanding correctly, but I grew up in a safe environment. I wasn't a minority, but racism to me was just, well, what is racism? Like, why are we valuing people on something they have no control over? Like, it just was a concept that was just hard for me to grasp. And that thought puts me in a place of vulnerability, because if I don't, I feel like by not recognizing it, that I'm automatically labeled a racist.
So growing up, you just couldn't understand racism. Like it's sort of an arbitrary form of judgment, and that you're kind of resonating with that term, judgment, and that because you don't see it, that you're being judged, and you're kind of vulnerable for not seeing it and talking about it. You're just noticing that there's a vulnerability if you don't kind of buy into that somehow.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that I don't recognize that racism is a thing, that it is very real for many people. And, you know, the division is being used as a weapon against us, and racism is a powerful tool, a powerful weapon of division. Religion is being used as a manipulation tool to manipulate for the benefit of greed. And it's so unfortunate because there is so much good in religion, and what, you know, it's, I'm not speaking to me being a religious in the sense of that I believe in a God. My religion is the power of the stars, the power of nature, the power of creation. Evolution is just miraculous things, but we all have that which resonates with us, and we need to honor and respect each other's ways without judgment.
Mm-hmm. So you would like to really honor and respect people's different ways of being without judging them. You weren't, and before you weren't like dismissing. You were saying that racism is a thing out there, and there's other like religion, etc., is being used to divide people instead of bring people together too. So it looks like you're really looking for a way of bringing people together. Sort of honoring the differences and sort of not dividing people, but, you know, how to bring people together.
Yeah. And all of this stuff, you know, I'm learning what emotions are, and I'm learning about, like, growing up, I didn't know what racism was. I didn't, you know, I'm asking, what is that? And I'm learning and trying to understand what that means for people. And it saddens me, I guess, that there is such a grip that power and greed have over us. And I just can't seem to find the way to stress enough how similar we are, and how much the importance rides on our recognizing that these tools are weapons against us.
So you're really wanting to put it up.
Yes,
Just an emphasis that these tools of racism and power and greed are actually tools that are trying to separate us from each other, and just, you know. Right.
The greed and the power is not a tool. The greed and power is wielding the tool of racism against us. And I just, you know, we've got these corrals of color, of religion, of, you know, our guns constitutionally correct, of all of these just corralling of us, and we find ourselves in a corral that most resonates with us, and then we become a them us instead of a we, where we have so much more in common with each other.
Mm-hmm. So there's all these different categories out there that people get into the guns or into the religion, or it's more of a us versus them sort of a categorization that's dividing people. And sounds like you would really like to find ways of, and behind that is maybe greed. And so you're really looking for ways of, well, how do we bring people together? And that was the time too, but.
Okay.
You want to finish the thought, there's just.
I just want us to smash the gates of the corrals that are containing us, and start to unite behind what is. And I'm not saying unite without recognizing our differences. It is in our differences that will make us powerful, but unite against that which is really killing us. It is truly, truly killing us. And we can't let that continue. And the longer we remain divided and accept these tools of power and tools of division, we will die.
So you're really wanting people to overcome the divisions and the things that divide us, because it's leading to death. This power that's trying to do that is leading to, in a very negative direction of death.
Yeah. And I just wanted, I know my time is out, but I just finally wanted to say, because I'm feeling this flow of I'm feeling judged, or there's going to be judgment by people watching this, which breaks my heart, because I don't mean to be seen that way. I love life.
You're feeling that people are going to see this with what you just said, and that you're going to be judged for what you just said, and you just feel very sad, and that people will sort of judge you for expressing yourself, and there's a sadness, and that you just wanting to share that you love life.
I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay. Great. So that was almost 2 hours. So I thought maybe just could kind of bring it to a close. I thought maybe we could have talked about any sort of steps forward. That didn't come up. So, but maybe we could just go around and hear from everyone, like how was the experience, and sort of any, without reflection, just to sort of a little bit of a debrief. So I don't know, William, would you like to start? Like, how was the experience, and any thoughts about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Just really quick, I wanted to address what Dayna said. Just thank you so much for sharing that and your experience. And it's important to name that and to say that to what you're feeling and what has happened. So thank you for feeling like you could share that. This empathy circle for me is this first time I have done one of these. And so it was a new experience, and I was a little nervous at first of messing up and not doing the protocol right, or different things, but I know it's a very safe place. But I like I mentioned earlier, I really like the active listening and the reflecting in between, and not trying to wait until the very end and reflect all of it at once, but as you're going, making sure you're being understood and you're being fully heard in the way that you're trying to convey your thoughts. I really appreciate that. And kind of sharing Michelle's concern, maybe people who are watching, maybe, what we're saying, we're not fully conveying all of our thoughts, since we only have the 6 minutes each, or different things like that. And so that might be a slight concern too, is I want to sometimes be able to expand more on how I'm feeling and with what I'm saying. But Edwin, I do agree with you that this is such an important way to dialogue, that this is a way to break down any of those preconceived judgments we might have of the people we're talking with, because we're actually listening to them, and we're not listening to counterpoint or to argue, we're listening to hear them. And I think that is absolutely where that transformation is going to happen. So I'm just thankful to have been included in this empathy circle. So thank you guys so much.
Well, thanks for taking part too. Dayna, would you like to share anything?
The last time you shared, Edwin, I saw more of that revolutionary spirit that you have about empathy. I wonder, maybe we should rebrand it a little bit, like put some sports shoes, like make you like sparkly hat or something. Whoa, what's that? Yeah, I think I relate to what Michelle is saying. The race conversation is so it's such a dangerous environment to be ponderous within, to be self-curious or spacious or have an unconventional perspective about or any of that. I wish that I could convey in here, how much you can't. When you're white, you can't say. You're not allowed to say how much you feel devoted to the well-being of people of color. The only safe way to convey that is to act shameful. So I fail, but I think that it's important for people who are able to talk about all kinds of different ways that race can be experienced and othering generally can be experienced. And it's normal that the inner critic comes in and says, no, don't do that. You can't do that. But we would just be the same boring old people if we never stretched beyond our comfort zone.
Okay.
Thanks.
Michelle, any final thoughts about this process or anything?
Yeah, I saw this for the very first time, an empathy circle for the very first time, maybe a couple months ago. And I had some curiosity about it. But I knew absolutely nothing. And I watched it and it was like 2 hours. Wow. So I watched it doing the dishes and doing some housework and stuff. And the first, kind of maybe 30, 45 minutes, I was like, okay. But then the second hour and a half, 15 minutes was like so profound in how it works and the listening that William was saying. Like, it's not just about, saying what you want to say, but it's about feeling like you're heard, like really feeling like you're heard. And that just draws so much power in feeling that you've been heard, and really kind of brings down and opens the gates to being, as Dayna said, curious about each other in a genuine way.
Thanks. So for anyone watching this and you feel critical of what's being said, you're invited to an empathy circle to talk about it. So that's what I always say when people are critical, come to an empathy circle and let's have a dialogue about it. We want to hear your opinion and your views within doing this process. So it's open. And I hope we can continue this process, do more empathy circles. Glad to we're doing empathy circle facilitator training, wanting to do different topics. And so I hope we can kind of keep that going and just connect with me and we can kind of do some more. So so that's it. I think we're at the 2-hour mark. So thank you everyone for taking part, and we'll see you in the next empathy circle.
Thank you, Edwin, and thank you, William and Dayna.
Yes, thank you all.
Mm-hmm.